Welcome to the WTR Small Cap Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. Today, I'm joined by Tony Scott, Chief Executive Officer, and Kim Pinson, Chief Financial Officer of Intrusion, Inc., NASDAQ, ticker symbol INTZ. Intrusion is a cybersecurity company that helps organizations protect their networks, endpoints, and critical infrastructure from cyber attacks through its Shield platform. It is built on decades of government-grade threat intelligence and uses reputation-based detection and artificial intelligence to stop malicious traffic before it becomes a problem. We will talk with Tony and Kim about the company's growth momentum, the expansion of Shield Cloud into the Amazon Web Services Marketplace, their plans for Microsoft Azure, and how Intrusion is positioning itself for sustainable growth in both government and commercial markets. Also joining is my WTR Technology Equity Research colleague, James Kisner. Tony, Kim, and James, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Later.
Tony, for listeners who may not know the company, could you please give us the elevator pitch on Intrusion and what makes it differentiated in the crowded cybersecurity space? And then also, I noted that you have a great professional background for your current role. So can you please give our audience just a 30,000-foot overview of your professional background as well?
Sure. Well, the short version is before coming to Intrusion about 4 years ago, I was the CIO for the U.S. federal government the last 2 years of the Obama administration. And there we dealt with the OPM breach and an ever-increasing number of cybersecurity issues, as you can imagine. Before that, I was CIO at VMware, CIO at Microsoft, CIO at the Walt Disney Company, and CTO at General Motors. And then a bunch of jobs in IT before that. Started my career really at Sun Microsystems. So had a bunch of cool jobs, one of which was a real Mickey Mouse organization, I have to say.
Very good. And then just a quick overview of the company business model, and then I'll turn it over to James.
Sure. So Intrusion has two main businesses segments. One is one we call our government consulting business, and we use some proprietary tools that we've built over 30 years in both a forensic and an investigative capacity. Most of that work is done for DoD and intelligence community and other government agencies. A high number of our people have high security clearances, and we work on some of the hardest problems there are in the cybersecurity world today. Our commercial business is something that is built around a product we call Shield. It exists in cloud, endpoint, and data center on-prem technologies, and you can use one or more than one or all in combination to protect your environment. The core technology is based on the belief that network flow is really important to continuously monitor. And the bad guys have figured out how to get around, traditional firewalls and IDPS and all the other technologies that we've been putting in place, for the last 20, 25 years. And Shield is based on this notion that reputation is important, and this is data we've collected over 30 years or so. We have 30 years of experience using algorithms and machine learning and now AI to determine the goodness or badness in terms of reputation of almost everything on the internet. Our database is at least 100 times bigger than anyone else's in terms of blacklist and whitelist, and that narrows the gray space in the middle significantly. And we can go more into how it actually works, but the idea is real-time, no latency monitoring of network traffic to and from the internet. And then I'd summarize and say we're finding that we're most effective in two specific areas. One is zero-day attacks where nobody's seen that specific attack before, but we block it because of the reputation of the sender in this particular case. And then we're also good at thwarting call homes to command and control servers out on the internet. And I think all of us realize today that there's a lot of different ways your network can get infected. But ultimately, something infected in your network wants to call home to a command and control server and say, "Hi, here I am. What do you want me to do?" And we're especially effective at blocking those. So those are some of the highlights, but that's a quick overview.
Great business model, and certainly no denying that there's going to be massive demand in the future, as there is currently, given the cybersecurity concerns around the world. Thanks for that overview, Tony. I'll now turn the podcast over to James Kisner to ask a few questions.
Thanks, Tim. So as of the second quarter of 2025, I think you posted 5 straight quarters of sequential revenue growth with near zero churn. So what's driving that consistency, and what are the key metrics that you watch most closely?
Well, I think it's when I started 4 years ago, we had the idea for Shield, but quite frankly, it wasn't as scalable as I thought it needed to be, nor was it as reliable as I knew it needed to be. And so we spent the first year or two really focused on scalability and reliability, and also adding capabilities that were relevant to broader deployments of Shield. And once that work was completed, we also introduced the cloud version and the endpoint versions of Shield, because I felt strongly that you need to cover all of that landscape in order to really have an effective network defense solution. And so we've been selling that. And more recently, we introduced a product specifically focused on critical infrastructure that uses our core technology. And that's been quite successful as well. So I think all of those have led to this sequential growth. Obviously, we aspire to have significantly bigger percentages, but considering the alternative of no growth or negative growth, we're happy that we've been able to show sequential growth. And the metrics I look at are just probably the same ones that you guys would pay attention to. We want to maintain profitability, in terms of cost of doing business. And we want to see growth in our core product line. So we're not profitable as a corporation today, but we want to keep our margins in a place where as we get growth, we can preserve those kinds of margins, and we're on track to do that. So pretty exciting times.
Yeah, investors love the margin focus. You alluded to this a couple versions of your product already. I'm hoping maybe you can kind of just walk us through. I think you've got cloud, endpoint, and on-premise. You just mentioned the expansion into critical infrastructure, but maybe just in plain English, can you just talk about the job of the various Shield products and where you see the greatest momentum for your technology?
Yeah. So the basic idea behind Shield, and I'll just start with our on-prem version, is most organizations have a firewall in place, sort of protecting against the worst of things that might come in from the internet. But traditional firewalls by design are meant to let a lot of other things through that in the eyes of a firewall are okay. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to use the internet. We wouldn't be able to browse websites and all kinds of other things. The bad guys have figured out how to embed malware in everyday things that you and I do on the internet. It could be in the form of malware embedded in advertising, could be surveillance activities. It could be a bunch of different things that most of the time go unnoticed by the average user. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot of different ways infections can occur in your network. You most of us are connected to suppliers and customers and, an ecosystem of partners and other people, not to mention employees who bring their own technology into work all the time. And that may contain and have embedded in it, malware that is not welcome. And so we think it's especially critical to look at all of that traffic that's been allowed through the firewall, who the source is and where the destination is. And that's the point at which we make a judgment based on reputation that this traffic is likely good or bad. Now, the traffic doesn't have to actually contain malware, but our philosophy is, why let bad guys in? They might be just doing surveillance, but let's cut that off and just make sure it doesn't happen. And that's essentially the job of intrusion technology, is based on reputation, keep the bad guys out, cut them off, don't let them do the things that they want to do. And our typical demo is we put our technology in place for about a week or sometimes 2 weeks. And at the end of that period, we show the customer all of the traffic that has been allowed in by their firewall and other technologies, and all the call homes that we detected that we would have blocked if we'd been in regular enforce mode with our technology. And most of the time, the customer is, their eyes get pretty big when they see all of the stuff that they previously hadn't been really aware of. And that might include things like destinations that they didn't realize that there was communications. You might be surprised if things in your network are talking to people in Russia or North Korea or places in China or other places that you really can't justify from a business perspective. And I think that's the value of our tool, is creating visibility of things that might otherwise, escape notice.
Maybe, the answer to the next question is encapsulated in what you just said. You guys have said that you can't find a direct peer to what Intrusion does. So what makes your detection approach, from larger names that people may recognize like Cisco or CrowdStrike,
Well,
makes it different?
yeah. So when we describe what we do, most people want to put us in a box that they know, right? So we all know what firewalls do. And it kind of sounds like what a firewall does, or sounds like an intrusion detection, technology, or some of the other things that we might be more familiar with. We spend a lot of money with Gartner, sort of digging deep on this, and also some other analysts. And their conclusion at the end of the day was, no, you guys really are a different beast. We don't have a name for it, but there's no magic quadrant or, direct competitors that we can find that do what you do. And some of the differentiators are this, number one, reputation-based approach that we have. The second thing is real time, so with no latency. So we do this on the active network connection. We don't do it after the fact. And the third one is just the results that our customers see, which is a dramatic reduction in false positives. And as I mentioned earlier, this detection of the call home. So those are some of the big differentiators that I think make us unique.
It's helpful. Could you drill down a little bit on this reputation inference engine and threat intelligence database that tracks billions of internet addresses? How does that reputation lens help you stop modern attacks that don't match known signatures?
Yeah, so a lot of technology today relies on detection of some sort of fingerprint or known, think of it as facial recognition for, digital communications, right? We've seen this face before. We've all seen the FBI most wanted list, maybe in the post office, and they'll have a picture of a guy, and this is somebody, if you see this guy, report it to the FBI and there's a reward. And most technology relies on sort of the digital equivalent of facial recognition. We don't solely rely on that. We get all the same feeds that a Palo Alto or a Cisco or anybody else do. But we've been tracking reputation on the internet since pretty much the very beginning of the internet. And one of our patents is a very compact way of storing that information. So we're like the proverbial elephant that never forgets anything. And that's also a key differentiator. A lot of other technologies, because they can't efficiently store this historical information, basically focus more on the last 2 to 3 years of bad actors' activity. And we don't. We never forget. So we've seen many examples where things that have been long forgotten have been resurrected by the bad guys because they realize that, hey, nobody's watching this anymore. And that's another sort of differentiator for us. What I'd tell you at bottom line is we got 30 years of experience, a lot of which is learning what doesn't work. And some portion of it was, hey, these things really, really work well. And so that's gotten us to the point where, as I mentioned, fewer false positives and catching things that other folks sort of bypass. In human terms, no matter where you grew up, you kind of knew by reputation who the bad folks were in town or, where you grew up. And the bad folks tended to associate with other bad folks and communicate with other bad actors. And we've done the equivalent of that for everything on the internet. And so it's known associations and patterns of communication that we can infer. If you're doing this, and this, and you're talking to these guys all the time, and you've been a source of malware in the past, pretty high chance you're a bad guy and we're just going to block you. Sorry.
That's really helpful. If only you could do that for Tinder profiles for people.
Right, exactly.
So this is one of my favorite topics. I'm very focused on artificial intelligence here at Water Tower, and you guys recently added an AI insight summary to the dashboard. So where does AI really help your customers today, and where doesn't it?
So there's a couple of approaches. We, like everybody else, are using AI to assist in our product development process. We found it useful to, write software, always supervised by human though, because like everything else AI, we've, seen some problems with it that, we don't want to let into our, production code. But I think the thing you're specifically referring to is we wanted to address this issue of helping focus precious resources, and these are human resources that typically exist in a network operations center or a security operations center, who are constantly being bombarded by alerts, and some of it's false positives, some of it is meaningful alerts, but not prioritized properly, and so on. And so we've added this AI insights driven report to help focus the attention on the most important things, the most critical things that we think an analyst or somebody in one of those kinds of positions should focus on. And our customers tell us that's been very helpful, because otherwise it's just squirrel, 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 kind of approach. And that can be, not productive and exhausting if you're in one of those roles. And so we all want to focus on what are the most important things? What are the high priority things that we should focus on? And part of AI insights is making recommendations of very specific actions that we recommend the analyst take to manage that risk or manage the thing that we've observed.
My Thursday humor is I thought you were making fun of me when my ADD when you said, "Look, squirrel."
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
In reality, that's the world of a SOC analyst
Yes.
today. It's, red alarms going off all over the place. And, you can imagine living in a house where the fire alarm's going off constantly, because the temperature went up a degree, or, maybe somebody lit a candle, but it's not really a, fire hazard. So we want to help, those folks that live in that world.
Let's talk about go-to-market and partnerships. Back in August, you said that Shield Cloud was on track to launch in the AWS Marketplace later that month. Has that launched? What are you seeing so far in terms of trials, paid conversions, and usage?
Yeah, so for Shield Cloud, we're in early days on that. We moved it into beta mode in Q3, early in Q3. We actually moved our own website over to AWS, protected by our own technology. I'm a big believer in sort of dog fooding our own technology as a part of our release to customers. And then since then, we've had a couple of other customers join in on the beta. We just announced last week in full general availability. And we have a couple more versions of that Shield Cloud platform in the works. We'll be in Azure, Microsoft Azure later this year, probably late Q4. And we see this as a exciting extension of our core technology. Most CIOs I know have still some stuff on-prem. They have a lot of stuff in the cloud on various platforms, and they have endpoints everywhere. We all do. And we think all of those need protection of the variety that we uniquely offer. And so that's the story with that. I think from a success standpoint, it's a little too early to tell because we've just begun our big marketing campaigns and other things, announcing the availability of this. And up to now, we've done very little in terms of demand gen, but now we're, ramping up pretty significantly. So I think in this quarter, we'll find out, in a more realistic way, whether this has got legs or not.
Can we double click on that Azure for a minute? Maybe
Yeah.
you can give us a little more detail on the status, like is it submitted, approved, or live? And if you can disclose that at this point, and are there any lessons from AWS rollout that you're applying here to Azure?
Well, we're just starting the engineering work, but our initial assessment is that some 90% or so of the work we had to do to get to the AWS Marketplace is either the same or similar to what we need to do for Azure. So we don't think it's going to be as heavy a lift as the AWS one was initially. And our goal again is to be in that marketplace, by the end of the year.
So more broadly, I think you started to allude to this. Just what other steps are you guys taking to enhance your go-to-market strategy?
Well, we're doing more webinars, podcasts. We're also doing more trade shows. And I think in 2024, we did maybe one or two. And our target audience, by the way, for a lot of these is managed service providers and managed service security providers. We see this trend going on in industry where for small and medium business and also state and local governments, they're increasingly relying on managed service providers and managed service security providers to provide cybersecurity services to them. They can't afford the talent and the resources to really mount a, effective defense. And so they're outsourcing this to these more highly qualified, third parties. And that's who we want, to sell to, so that our technology becomes part of the package that they offer their customers. And those are the most vulnerable parts of our society today. It's those small and medium businesses and state and local governments that really can't afford, to hire the people. There's just not enough smart people in cyber to go around, and they're the ones who suffer the most. So we've specifically targeted that to be a marketplace for us.
Great, that's helpful. So I'm going to give you a break, Tony, and ask Kim a couple
Sure.
financial questions. Your CFO, Kim Pinson. So, Kim, I think you've emphasized that Intrusion has the sufficient capital to fund operations to the remainder of 25 and early 26. Just how do you think about balancing spending discipline and continuing to invest in growth?
Our primary focus has been growing the top line. And so with every spend decision, we look at how is this going to help us accomplish that goal? And then we also look at what the return on that investment will be. We will continue to maintain strong discipline, but we are evaluating each spend decision to make sure it's helping us advance towards our goal.
Very helpful. So Tony talked about margins. Let's turn back to that for a second. Gross margins have held here in the mid 70s. Though product mix, I understand, can swing things. Just how are you thinking about maintaining margins as Shield adoption grows and that customer mix shifts towards more commercial clients?
Well, the gross margin mix is most impacted by Shield versus consulting, and not necessarily commercial versus government. So as we grow our Shield revenues, we do expect to see our margins to grow as well. The Shield product mix will also impact our margins as each Shield product has a different gross margin mix as well.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying that. Tony, a few more for you here. I want to talk about customers and use cases. You announced a partnership with PortNexus to embed Shield Endpoint into their MyFlare and Pledge Plus products, which I believe are used in school safety and fleet management. Could you provide us with an update on how that partnership is progressing?
Yeah, this is a really great solution. I think we're all concerned, as parents and grandparents about school safety, and PortNexus came up with this solution that allows a teacher in a classroom to very quickly alert law enforcement authorities and school administrators if there's an incident in their classroom. And with the push of a button, it turns on all of the video cameras in the facility that are relevant to that location. But probably the most important part is it also sends a link to everybody's cell phone who's registered. And with a click on that link, it can turn the cell phone turn the camera on, so that law enforcement has much more situational awareness of what's going on in that location and the GPS location of those phones and so on. Anybody who's ever been involved in one of these knows that first couple of minutes is critical in terms of, isolating the incident, creating situational awareness, and taking preventative measures to contain, whatever's going on. And this solution has the ability to sort of instantaneously create situational awareness where you might have been blind to what was going on before. And we're providing the network security for this solution for the endpoints to make sure that they're tamper-proof, that somebody can't take it down, as part of a planned attack on a institution. And so we're really happy to partner with PortNexus on this solution. And their other solution is a safe driving solution that, again, prevents distracted driving from taking place. And we'll try to do more of these kinds of deals as well, where intrusion core technology is a part of another solution that benefits society in some way. But we're really, really excited about the potential for this. We've done a bunch of trade shows with the Port Nexus people, and it's the shortest sales cycle I've ever seen. When a school administrator sees this solution, they just almost immediately say, I got to have this, for our school. And so we're being installed in schools in Florida and in Texas. And we expect that over the next year or so, that'll greatly expand as we get more of these deployed in the first bunch of sites. So we're pretty excited about it.
That's really helpful. So you talked about critical infrastructure monitoring capability earlier, and we announced a extended Department of Defense contract worth $3 million. Just are there lessons from that work that can transfer protecting utilities and local operators here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I think, this is also an exciting development for us. Kristi Noem, in talking about, Homeland Security generally, announced this year a focus on critical infrastructure in particular. And I think it's a recognition that all of our capability as a society, whether it's, civil activities or military activities, no matter what they are, depend on certain parts of, critical infrastructure, water supply, telecommunications facilities, power facilities, and the like. And you could name off, a number of others as well. But if an adversary could shut those things down, it could cripple our society, very quickly. We see this happen in big weather events, but imagine, some equivalent of a big weather event shutting down everything that we depend on: water supply, lighting, telecom, what have you. And we know these are targets for our, from some of our, less friendly countries, I'll call them. And so protecting that is a very important task, and we have a solution that's uniquely tailored to, protect against adversarial attacks on critical infrastructure.
For what it's worth, I will tell you, I think you're onto something there. I've read the same things you have. And as we were talking about from your government background, I went through this FBI Citizens Academy. But prior to moving to Miami 6 weeks ago from Chicago, for the prior 6 months, almost daily, I saw Black Hawk helicopters flying around the water intakes in Lake Michigan, interestingly enough.
Yeah. A lot of this technology was put in place 20, 30, 40 years ago. Some of it pre-internet, some of it just post-internet, because there was a big revolution in sort of, creating electronic controls for a lot of these systems that had been manual before. And ultimately they all got hooked up to the internet, but all done before some of these existential threats sort of were known about or existed. And so retroactively now we've got to go back and do a lot of things to really protect them in a way that's both effective and also just cost effective, because you can't replace this stuff very quickly, as it turns out.
Great. You just said that school safety sales cycles can be surprisingly fast, while utilities and operation technology customers are slower and more methodical, I believe. So how do you how do you tailor your pitch for each? Is it different?
Well, I think we just have to be realistic. Our sales folks and our partners are well attuned to the life cycle of these organizations that they're selling to. The government works in annual funding cycles. We know that. We've experienced it. We are prepared to deal with it. And other customers are, not subject to the same sort of buying cycles and so on. We have ways that we can help address each of those cycles, in a useful way. And sometimes it starts with a small pilot that they have discretionary funds to use to try things out. And sometimes it's a more bigger, full-blown thing that is a longer sales cycle, but ultimately, is a more meaningful commitment. So we're prepared for that. Doesn't bother us. We'd like to have everything go quicker, but I'd also like to be thin, rich, and handsome, and that's not going to happen either. So,
hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, Tony.
yeah.
So, wrapping up here. So, when you joined as CEO in 2021, what was the first thing you changed about how Intrusion builds or ships products, and what's still on your fix list nearly 4 years later?
Well, the main thing was the commitment to, the main thing was the commitment to, scalability and reliability for our core products. I was really excited by the prospect that I saw in these technologies and in our core IP. But I knew to be successful, we were going to have to invest in both of those aspects, scalability and reliability. I think we've cracked the code on that. Those are not my main focus anymore, but we are maintaining, the status quo in terms of reliability and scalability, and we'll do some things to continue to improve that. The focus now is just, as Kim said, sales. We've been kind of the best kept secret in cybersecurity for a long time, and we want to change that. We want to let more and more people know about what we can do and why it makes sense. And so you're going to see a lot more outreach from us and marketing activity, demand gen activity to let the world know what we can do.
Okay. Last question before we wrap up here. So, if we talk again in a year, could you offer 2 headlines that you would most be excited to share about Shield and your customer base?
Well, I think it would be 2 things. The first one, it's not an announcement or a headline, but it would be best if nothing happened. There were no breaches, no issues, and we got a little bit of credit for that. That would be wonderful. And the other one would be, a dramatic increase in our stock price because sales have gone up and we have more and more customers. Those are the 2 things I'd like to see happen.
Well, yeah, your friends at CrowdStrike, I think, had an issue like that not that long ago, and yeah, that'd be great news on the stock. So thanks for your time. I'm going to pass it back to Tim to wrap us up.
Yeah, I'm fairly confident that Land Rover wishes they had been your client a year ago.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us today, Tony Scott, Chief Executive Officer, and Kim Pinson, Chief Financial Officer of Intrusion, Inc., NASDAQ, ticker symbol INTZ. And thanks to my equity research colleague, James Kisner, for also joining us. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, our colleague from WTR, Krista Fitzpatrick. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, industry-specific symposiums, fireside chats, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small Cap Spotlight podcast.